Hello everyone. In this live video, I'd like to talk about what is the best way to stretch. I'd like to compare pretty much passive stretching, like a static type stretch, comparing it to active or dynamic type stretching. Actually, my name is Mike Cola, and I've been a fitness trainer and gym owner for over 25 years. In this live video, let's compare like passive and active stretching. Let's talk about the pros and cons of both. And also, by the way, I like to thank all the people that subscribe to my channel. If you like the videos I put out, I try to put them out every single week. Subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's first talk about what passive stretches is. Passive stretching just means that you're either doing a static stretch, meaning you're using body weight. Like for example, you're putting your leg up on a chair, you lean forward, you try to touch your toes, so you're statically lengthening. You lengthen the muscle, you hold the muscle in a lengthened position, and that's a classic form of stretching. Also, passively would be very similar to static stretching. Say I lay someone down on a massage table or like a treatment table, and I passively flex their shoulder. So I take their arm and I passively push their arm, flex their shoulder into their passive end range. That would be pretty much what I mean by passive stretching, where someone's either putting you into your end range of motion, or you're actually using your own body weight by leaning forward, for example, and like touching your toes to stretch out your hamstring, as opposed to active stretching. Okay, active stretching or dynamic stretching is that you're actively contracting into these positions. So, for example, if I want to stretch out the, if I want to stretch out, this would be like raise the anterior. If I want to flex my shoulder and stretch out the front of my shoulder, front of my chest, I actively contract my posterior muscles, and this would be an active stretch. Same thing. Like if I want to stretch out my hamstrings, actively, I would lift my leg up, like I'm doing now. I'd lift my leg up, contracting the front, actively contracting the front, releasing the hamstrings. Okay. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of passive as opposed to active. And actually, this video is pretty much going to promote why I like active stretching. Well, I think active stretching is definitely the way to go. The best way to increase your flexibility. It's also the safest way to stretch. Okay. And then I'm going to talk about some of the negatives that I think that come along with passive stretching. And the thing about passive stretching is that there will definitely be a difference between your passive range of motion compared to your active range of motion, meaning that when someone passively flexes your arm, it takes you into your end range. That's going to be a much greater range of motion than what you can actively contract into. So, first of all, that should be a warning sign right there, meaning that if your body cannot actively contract into a position, it shouldn't be there. It doesn't belong to be there. Like for example, does not have strength or may not have strength in that position. Plus, it may not have neurological control. That means your brain may not be communicating really well with your muscular system in that end passive range. Okay, I mean that if you can't contract all the way back as far as your passive range, this is a very vulnerable range. So that's one negative of passive static type stretching. The difference between your active and passive range is kind of like your danger zone, kind of like a vulnerable place to be, because you don't really have strength in that range and you don't have neurological control. And let me give you an example. I give this example before. I did a couple of live videos on Facebook and Instagram explaining this. Like let's say, for example, you're a tennis player, okay, and you have a match that night, and you've been really stretching out. You've been doing a lot of passive and static stretching for your inner thighs, for your hamstrings to be loose to play, or maybe you have a trainer and the trainer really passively stretched out your inner thighs and your hamstrings. So now you're able to go into these positions that maybe you wouldn't be before you were stretched out. And in my opinion, that those are vulnerable positions to be into. For example, if you can lunge into a position and actually go beyond your active range and you have no strength or no neurological control in that range, that's where you can get caught. That's where you can injure yourself. That's where you can get hurt. I mean, there might be reasons for doing passive type stretching. For example, if maybe if you go to see a physical therapist post surgical, and maybe there's some adhesions, and therapists are looking to break up these adhesions by doing some passive type stretching, then I think it might be fine. It could be an idea. But for you as an individual to, like, say, really intensely statically stretch, or have someone passively stretch you like on a table and really force you into these end ranges, and then you go out and do something taxing on your system, like play a sport or go work out or do something, I think you're more vulnerable to injury, because now you can get into positions that you don't belong being in, because you don't really have control or strength in those positions. Like for example, if someone really stretched out, like stretched out, like I'm saying, really passively stretched out their shoulder, and then I put them on the table and I tested their strength of that end passive range, I'm pretty sure they're not going to have any strength there. They'll probably give a few degrees to pretty much their active range before before this strength and the neurological system actually kicks in. So that's kind of like the danger zone, the difference between your passive and active range of motion. Okay, so I really wanted to drive that point home. Okay, now let's talk about all the benefits of active stretching. First of all, when it comes to active stretching, in my opinion, is you really almost can't hurt yourself contracting into any position. Okay, because your body just won't let you hurt yourself. There's different reflexes, there's different mechanisms, there's different reasons why your central nervous system will not let you contract into a position of pain. It will just shut the muscle down or into a position of instability. It just will not allow it. So, first of all, any position you can contract into is a great position to be in. So, for instance, if you are tight, like for example, if the anterior part is short, say your chest is tight, right? And you want to increase the range of motion in your chest, I would just you can bring your arm all the way back. You're actively contracting all the posterior muscles, rear deltoid, rhomboid muscle along the line that. What are you releasing? You're releasing the anterior. You're releasing your chest. And a great technique to take active stretch to the next level is to use isometrics, meaning that pause in the position of weakness. Okay, the position of weakness and in the position of tightness. So, for example, when you're looking to stretch your chest out, bring your arm all the way back. There were ways to make this. This is not a video on specific stretching. This is more on the concepts of active stretching and on passive stretching. For example, like your pectoral attaches to your sternum, to your clavicle, and to your humerus, and that is actually an internally rotated of the shoulder. So, like, I'll give an example here. When it comes to the chest, first I would keep the elbow straight. I would externally rotate the humerus, so you're elongating the pectoral even more, and then you're contracting or the posterior muscle like your rear deltoid, your rhomboid, and you're giving your pec, actually a really good stretch. And I'm actually going to hold this. I'm going to do an isometric static contraction. Say for 6 seconds, I might release it, externally rotate again, hold that for 6 seconds. These isometrics at the end ranges of your active range are a great way to truly increase your flexibility. And you can do this in more of this is an isolated example, but you can also use it in a more of an integrated example. Say if you're standing and you're fully rotating to the right to your end range, hold that position, say for 5 to 6 seconds, come out, and you can repeat that 5 or 6 times. That's a great way just to use, like an integrated approach to increase your flexibility and to increase your range of motion actively. Okay, for example, a way I wouldn't like that for like a passive way to do that, for example, is to use like inertia and use momentum. Say, for example, to take hold on to say a medicine ball and to just like swing yourself into rotation. No, there may be other reasons for doing that, but let's assume you're just looking to increase the range of motion of your rotational ability, maybe your hips, or your spine, your thoracic lumbar area, whatever. And if you took a ball and like quickly rotated, and the weight and the inertia of that ball took you beyond your active range into a passive range, in my opinion, that would be somewhat of a danger zone, because now you're opening up range of motions that you can't contract into and that you have no neurological control in. Okay. And this goes a little bit to the concept. I'm also, if you watch some of my videos before, I'm also a muscle activation technique specialist. And I've taken the 10-month internship a number of years ago with teaching the palpation method of MAT, and I've also taken the jump starts. I really like the jump starts. The jump starts really focus in on this active isometric like thought process for increasing range of motion and pretty much for just strengthening positions of weakness. Like active stretching in a way is really working out. That's why I like it so much. Whereas passive or static stretching, like someone's doing the work for you, whether it's your own body weight or inertia, like bringing you into a position as opposed to you contracting into a position. Okay, like and let me give some other examples of what I mean by between passive and active. Let's take an example of like a martial artist, who actually wants to do a high kick, be able to kick really high. Okay, like one way of doing it obviously is to work on it actively, like doing like a kick where you're just slowly contracting, lifting your leg up as high as you can, try to hold that end range. That's a great way of increasing your kicks. Okay. But for example, if you're like stretching yourself out first, like doing a lot of static type stretching, inner thigh, hamstrings, hips, things along the like statically, and maybe you have a buddy of yours, a guy, you know, a friend of yours or a trainer stretching you out so you can kick higher. Those are kicks that can potentially lead to injury because the end ranges of the kicks, you're going into your passive range, you're beyond your active range, and then you're vulnerable to injury. Okay. So that's the biggest difference. Same thing, same thing like you take the example of a tennis player. A tennis players who's serving, they really want to get their arm all the way back there to hit a great tennis serve. The problem is that if you passively stretch yourself or like take your arm, push it into a wall and open up this range of motion and then go serve a tennis ball, you're going into ranges of motion you really don't have control of. Like your brain did not say, I can contract into that position. Okay, you've used like passive tension, static, static type stretching to get you there when you really don't have strength there. But for example, if you contracted into that position, that's the range you want to be. So you can almost argue that you might be a little better being tighter, but having control and having strength in all the positions your body can go into, as opposed to as opposed to using static stretching, using passive range of motion to open up these ranges. And there are other modalities that can open up range of motion too, like ART. There's all different techniques that can open your body up. The only problem is that sometimes you're kind of like tricking your central nervous system into thinking that it's okay to go into these positions when meanwhile you have no strength in these positions and you really don't have, like, you haven't extended the limits of the receptors that are communicating with your brain, with your central nervous system, that's going to allow you or regulate whether you should go into these positions or not. Okay, that's why. So I'm really trying to drive home with this live video how I think active stretching like that, and some people use the term dynamic stretching a little bit too, and even the term mobility movement. I do a lot of videos on mobility movement, where you're actually moving into all different positions. Okay, like for example, like me passively taking my head and stretching out the right side of my whole cervical would be like a passive stretch, as opposed to me just actively moving in all these different positions. This is how I like to, stretch my whole body with mobility movement, with active and dynamic stretching. Well, I hope everyone really enjoyed this video. I know it's a live video, so I'm just kind of like winging it live. And if anyone has any questions, just drop me an email. Once again, if you like my channel, you like these videos I put out, definitely subscribe to my channel. I try to put a video or two out every week. Also follow me on Instagram too. I put out videos and great things on Instagram all the time too. Well, take care, and I hope everyone's having a great day.